If you think you've heard the most shocking story about hidden heroes, wait till you hear this one. Subscribe for more unbelievable true stories that will change how you see ordinary people forever. Nobody looked at Bill twice. He'd been working as a janitor at Lincoln High School for 3 years, and he was like an invisible man. Every morning at 6 a.m. he'd arrive, quietly clean the hallways, eat his sandwich alone in his corner during lunch break, and disappear by 4 p.m. He never talked to anyone, never made eye contact. Students called him Ghost Bill because he was so quiet they sometimes doubted if he was even there. He never took off his hooded sweatshirt, always kept his head down. Mid-40s, average height, ordinary guy. Exactly the type everyone overlooked. But there was something they didn't know yet. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Bill was cleaning the hallways again. Students were ignoring him again. At 10:30 a.m., while first period was in session, a man entered the school. Receptionist Sarah noticed something gleaming under the man's black jacket, but it was too late. When the man pulled out his gun, Sarah's scream echoed through the entire school. The alarm system started blaring. Teachers frantically locked classroom doors while students hid under desks. Principal Peterson was trying to initiate emergency protocol, but his hands were shaking. The gunman walked down the main hallway, his footsteps echoing. "I want to see everyone," he shouted. His voice was the kind that froze the entire school. This is exactly when everything changed. Bill was cleaning the third-floor men's restroom at that moment. When he heard the gunshots, he paused. His hands weren't trembling. His breathing didn't quicken. It was as if he'd heard this sound countless times before. He pulled down his hood. For the first time, when his neck became visible, something unimaginable was revealed. On the side of his neck, where it was usually hidden, was a small but distinct tattoo. 3 arrow symbols, and below them, death before dishonor. He pulled something from under his cleaning cart, wrapped in a plastic bag, an old but well-maintained pistol. The moment it touched his hands, it was like reuniting with an old friend. Bill wasn't Bill anymore. As he descended the stairs, his footsteps were different. No longer the hesitant sounds of a shy janitor, but the calculated steps of a trained warrior. He moved, checking every corner, staying close to walls. When the gunman approached the main hall, a voice from behind stopped him. "Drop your weapon and get on the ground." The voice was so calm that even the gunman was surprised. When he turned, the sight confused him. It was that invisible school janitor, but now he was completely different. His posture, his gaze, the way he held his weapon, professional. "Who the hell are you?" the gunman shouted. Bill didn't answer. He just took a few more steps closer. His eyes were on the gunman, but simultaneously scanning the entire environment. The automatic reflexes from years of training had returned. But the most shocking part hadn't happened yet. When the gunman pointed his weapon at Bill, Bill moved. He moved so fast it was impossible to understand what happened. A second later, the gunman was on the ground. His weapon was in Bill's hands, and no one had seen how it happened. Security camera footage from Principal Peterson's office would later be analyzed by experts who couldn't fully understand what Bill had done. When police arrived, this is what they found. The gunman lying handcuffed on the ground, no students or staff injured, and Bill back by his cleaning cart with his hood up, as if nothing had happened. But now everyone was wondering, who was Bill really? As he was leaving school that day, Principal Peterson approached him. "Bill, we need to talk." Bill stopped but didn't turn around. "Nothing to talk about. We know who you are now. That tattoo, Special Forces, right?" Bill finally turned. In his eyes was that expression students saw for the first time that day. Tired but determined. "I used to be. Now I'm just a janitor." Peterson had hundreds of questions in his mind, but Bill had already started walking away. As you watched him from behind, he was that old invisible Bill again, but now everyone knew. A hero worked at their school, and no one had noticed. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. The next morning, Bill arrived at school expecting everything to return to normal. But when he walked through the main entrance, something was different. Students weren't ignoring him anymore. They were staring, some with fear, some with curiosity, but most with something he'd never seen before: respect. Principal Peterson was waiting for him by his cleaning supplies closet. "Bill, the school board wants to meet with you. The police have questions. The media is calling." Bill shook his head. "I just want to do my job." "Your job? Bill, you saved 300 lives yesterday. You can't just go back to mopping floors like nothing happened." But that's exactly what Bill tried to do. He grabbed his cleaning cart and headed toward the science wing. Behind him, he could hear whispers echoing through the hallways. Students were pointing. Teachers were gathering in small groups. Everyone was talking about the mysterious janitor. By lunchtime, the story had spread beyond the school walls. Local news vans were parked outside. Parents were calling. Social media was buzzing with hashtags like Janitor Hero and Ghost Bill. Wait until you hear what they discovered next. A reporter named Jessica Martinez from Channel 7 News had been digging into Bill's background all morning. What she found made her hands shake as she read through the classified documents she'd somehow accessed.
Bill wasn't just any Special Forces veteran. He was Staff Sergeant William "Ghost" Thompson, recipient of 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Silver Star. He'd served 4 tours in Afghanistan, led countless rescue missions, and saved more lives than most people could count.
But there was more. The record showed he'd been discharged 5 years ago after a mission went wrong. His entire unit was killed in an ambush. He was the sole survivor, found 3 days later barely alive, clutching his fallen teammates' dog tags. The psychological evaluation mentioned severe PTSD, survivor's guilt, and his request for complete civilian anonymity. That's when it all made sense. Bill hadn't become invisible by accident. He'd chosen to disappear. But Jessica wasn't the only one investigating. By 3 p.m., news trucks from 3 different stations were lined up outside the school. A crowd of parents, neighbors, and curious onlookers had gathered. Everyone wanted to see the hero janitor. Bill tried to leave through the back exit, but they were waiting there too. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved in his face, reporters shouted questions. "Sergeant Thompson, how does it feel to be a hero again? Will you be returning to military service? What would you say to other veterans struggling with civilian life?" This what Bill stopped walking. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. The old confidence, the leadership presence that had once commanded respect on battlefields. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't stand by and watch innocent people get hurt. There are thousands of veterans out there doing ordinary jobs, living quiet lives, who would do the same thing. We don't need recognition. We just need to be left alone to heal." He pushed through the crowd and disappeared into his old pickup truck. But the damage was done. His cover was blown. The most heart-wrenching moment was still coming. That evening, Bill sat in his small apartment, staring at a photo on his kitchen table. 7 soldiers in combat gear, arms around each other's shoulders, all of them smiling. He was in the center, younger, confident, surrounded by his team, his brothers. Below the photo was a letter he'd written but never sent, addressed to the families of his fallen comrades. In it, he apologized for surviving when they didn't. He promised to honor their memory by living a life worthy of their sacrifice. His phone had been ringing all day. Military officials, job offers from security companies, interview requests. He'd ignored them all, but at 8 p.m. there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found something that nearly broke him. 3 teenagers from Lincoln High were standing there, but they weren't alone. Behind them were their parents, and behind them were more students and families. About 50 people total. The first student, a girl named Emma, who'd been in the chemistry lab during the attack, stepped forward. "Mr. Bill, Sergeant Thompson, we wanted to thank you. Not for the cameras or the news, just thank you." She handed him a card. When he opened it, he found messages from hundreds of students. Simple words like, "You saved my life," "Thank you for protecting us," and "You're our hero." But the message that hit him hardest was from a boy named Marcus. "My dad died in Iraq when I was 8. Yesterday you reminded me what he died for. Thank you for showing me that heroes are real." For the first time in 5 years, Bill's eyes filled with tears. That night changed everything, but not in the way anyone expected. Word spread through the veteran community faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, something unprecedented began happening. Other veterans started coming forward, sharing their own stories of invisible service, quiet heroism, and the struggle to find purpose after war. A Marine named Rodriguez, who worked as a night security guard, revealed he'd stopped 3 different robbery attempts at his building. An Army medic named Sarah, who worked as a school nurse, had saved countless children from medical emergencies using combat field medicine. A Navy SEAL who drove city buses had once talked a suicidal teenager off a bridge during his route. They called it the Ghost Bill effect, the realization that heroes weren't wearing capes or seeking glory. They were working ordinary jobs, living quiet lives, and serving their communities in ways no one noticed. The school board offered Bill a position as head of security with triple his current salary. Military contractors offered him 6-figure consulting deals. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell his story. He turned them all down. Instead, he did something no one saw coming. Bill asked to meet with the gunman. The request shocked everyone: prison officials, psychologists. Even the gunman himself couldn't understand why the man he'd tried to kill wanted to visit him. But Bill was insistent. The meeting took place in a Stark conference room at County Jail. The gunman, a 23-year-old named Tyler Morrison, sat across from Bill, separated by bulletproof glass. Tyler expected anger, maybe even revenge. Instead, Bill looked at him with something Tyler had never experienced: understanding. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," Bill said quietly. "To feel like the world doesn't see you, doesn't care if you exist." Tyler stared, confused and angry. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're angry. I know you feel forgotten. I know you think violence is the only way to make people notice you." Bill leaned forward. "I felt the same way when I came home from Afghanistan. The difference is, I had brothers who died for something bigger than my pain. You tried to create pain to fill your emptiness." The conversation lasted 2 hours. By the end, Tyler was crying, not from fear or self-pity, but from something he hadn't felt in years: being understood by someone who truly listened. That visit would spark something bigger than anyone imagined. Bill started a program called Invisible Heroes. It paired struggling veterans with schools, not as security guards or counselors, but as mentors and quiet protectors. Veterans who felt lost and forgotten found purpose in watching over the next generation. Students learned that strength comes in many forms, and that the most powerful people are often the quietest. The program spread to 12 states within 6 months. Crime rates in participating schools dropped 40%. Veteran suicide rates in those communities decreased by 25%. Most importantly, young people began recognizing that heroism isn't about glory. It's about showing up, staying vigilant, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. But the real transformation happened at Lincoln High School. Bill continued working as a janitor, but everything was different now. Students said good morning. Teachers included him in conversations. Parents thanked him during pickup. He was no longer invisible, but he was also no longer alone. The most touching moment came 6 months later during the school's graduation ceremony. Emma, the student who'd thanked him that first night, was valedictorian. In her speech, she said something that left the entire auditorium in tears. "People always ask what we want to be when we grow up. They expect us to say doctor, lawyer, teacher. But I want to be like Sergeant Thompson. I want to be someone who shows up every day, who watches over others, who's ready to act when it matters most. I want to be an invisible hero." After the ceremony, Bill stood in the parking lot watching families celebrate. Principal Peterson approached him. "Any regrets about your cover being blown?" Bill thought for a moment, watching students pose for pictures with their families, safe and happy and unaware of all the quiet guardians watching over them. "No," he said finally. "I spent 5 years hiding from who I was. Turns out the best way to honor my fallen brothers wasn't to disappear. It was to keep serving, just in a different uniform." As the sun set behind Lincoln High School, Bill walked to his cleaning supplies one last time. But tomorrow, he wouldn't be just a janitor. He'd be Sergeant Thompson again, training other invisible heroes, proving that the most important battles aren't fought on distant battlefields. They're fought in school hallways, office buildings, and neighborhood streets by ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one's watching. The story of Ghost Bill became legend, but the lesson was real. Heroes don't need recognition, they just need purpose. And sometimes, the most powerful way to serve is to become invisible until the moment you're needed most. That's when you step out of the shadows and remind the world what courage looks like. The ripple effects of that day continued for months. The Invisible Heroes program expanded nationwide, with over 200 veterans joining in the first year. Crime rates in participating schools dropped by 60%, and veteran suicide rates in those communities decreased by 40%. But the most profound changes were personal. Bill found himself becoming a reluctant mentor to other struggling veterans. Men and women who'd felt lost after service began finding purpose in quiet protection. They learned that heroism wasn't about recognition or glory. It was about showing up, staying vigilant, and being ready when others needed you most. The students at Lincoln High never forgot what they'd witnessed. Many went on to careers in public service, law enforcement, and military service, inspired by the lesson that real strength often comes in humble packages. Emma became a social worker specializing in veteran rehabilitation, dedicating her career to helping other invisible heroes find their way. Principal Peterson instituted a new tradition at Lincoln High. Every year during Veterans Day Assembly, they honor not just those who served in uniform, but those who continue serving in civilian clothes. A special recognition goes to the invisible heroes, janitors, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and security guards who protect their communities in ways no one notices. The gunman, Tyler Morrison, spent his prison time in therapy and education programs. Bill's visit had planted a seed that slowly grew into genuine remorse and a desire to understand his own pain without inflicting it on others. He eventually earned his GED and began counseling other inmates struggling with rage and invisibility. 5 years later, Tyler was released on parole. His first stop wasn't to family or friends. It was to Lincoln High School. He found Bill in the same hallway where their confrontation had taken place, quietly mopping the floors as if nothing had changed. Tyler stood there for several minutes, watching the man who'd saved him from becoming a mass murderer. Finally, he approached. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to thank you." Bill looked up, recognized him immediately, but showed no fear or anger. "How are you doing, Tyler?" "Better. I'm working with at-risk youth now, trying to help kids who feel invisible like I did. I wanted you to know that what you said to me in prison, it changed everything." They talked for nearly an hour. Tyler explained how he'd learned to channel his need for recognition into positive service, working with teenagers who felt forgotten by society. Bill listened with the same calm attention he'd shown 5 years earlier, offering quiet encouragement and practical wisdom. As Tyler prepared to leave, he asked the question that had haunted him. "Why did you visit me in prison? Why did you care what happened to someone who tried to hurt innocent people?" Bill's answer was simple. "Because I used to be angry too. I used to feel invisible. The difference was, I had brothers who taught me that real strength means protecting people, not hurting them. You just needed someone to teach you the same lesson." The local news picked up Tyler's story. The former school shooter turned youth counselor, mentored by the janitor who'd stopped him. It became a powerful example of restorative justice and the possibility of redemption. The segment won a National Journalism Award and sparked conversations about addressing the root causes of violence rather than just punishing the results. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Tyler's visit, Bill received a letter with a military return address, Inside was a photo of 7 young soldiers in combat gear, standing proudly in front of an American flag in Afghanistan. The letter was from Marcus, the student who'd written about his father's death in Iraq years earlier. He'd joined the Army after high school and was now a staff sergeant leading his own unit. Sergeant Thompson, the letter read, "I wanted you to know that everything I learned about leadership, I learned from watching you. Not from your military service, though I respect that deeply, but from how you carried yourself every day at school. You taught me that real leaders don't seek attention, they seek opportunities to serve. You showed me that strength isn't about being seen, it's about seeing what others need and providing it quietly." Marcus went on to describe how he'd shared Bill's story with his soldiers, how it had influenced his leadership style, and how he was teaching his own men that their greatest victories might come not in dramatic battles, but in the small daily acts of service that no one would ever know about. Bill kept that letter in his wallet, reading it whenever he felt the weight of his invisible service becoming too heavy. It reminded him that influence ripples outward in ways we never see, that the quiet example of one person can shape generations. The documentary crew that had tried to film Bill's story eventually gave up on getting his cooperation, but they didn't give up on the story itself. Instead, they created a film about the broader phenomenon of invisible heroes, veterans, first responders, teachers, and community members who serve without recognition. The film, titled Ghost Protocol, premiered at Sundance Film Festival and won the Audience Award for Best Documentary. Bill never watched it, but hundreds of thousands of other people did. It sparked a national conversation about how society treats its quiet protectors and led to legislation providing better support for veteran transition programs. On the 10-year anniversary of the school incident, Lincoln High held a special assembly. Bill had finally retired from janitorial work, but had taken a position as the school's veterans liaison, helping other former service members find meaningful work in education and community service. During the assembly, Principal Peterson, who had also stayed at the school far longer than he'd planned, inspired by Bill's example, read a proclamation from the governor declaring Lincoln High School a sanctuary of service, officially recognizing it as a place where heroes work quietly to protect others. But the moment that brought tears to Bill's eyes wasn't the official recognition. It was when Emma's daughter, now a kindergartner at the elementary school that fed into Lincoln High, presented him with a drawing she'd made. It showed a man in a janitor's uniform with angel wings, surrounded by children. At the bottom, in crayon letters, she'd written, "Thank you for keeping Mommy safe." As Bill looked at that simple drawing, he realized something profound. He'd spent years thinking his military service was his greatest contribution to the world. He'd thought his identity was tied to his uniform, his rank, his combat achievements. But the truth was simpler and more beautiful. His greatest victory wasn't any battle he'd fought overseas. It was the battle he'd fought against his own sense of worthlessness, the war he'd waged against the belief that his service was over. He'd learned that heroism isn't about dramatic moments of glory. It's about showing up every single day, ready to protect people who don't even know they need protection. The invisible hero had found his purpose not in being seen, but in seeing what others needed and providing it without expectation of reward. He'd discovered that the most powerful position in any community isn't at the top where everyone watches you, but in the middle where you can watch everyone else. And in a world full of people desperate to be noticed, Bill Thompson had found peace in being the guardian no one knew they had. Man, thanks for sticking with me through this incredible journey. Stories like this remind us that heroes walk among us every single day. We just have to learn how to see them. If this story moved you, drop a comment about the invisible heroes in your own life. I'd love to hear about the ordinary people doing extraordinary things in your world. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the people around you. Word count 4,523. Character count 27,639.